Welcome to the session, everybody. We are going to talk about parameterizing your ADF pipelines. And just to be very clear, this session is going to be on the more technical side. We're going to be walking through different components inside Data Factory and talk about how to minimize your workload and maximize what you can do inside this great tool. So a little bit of self-introduction. My name is Chi, and I am a lead data architect at 3Cloud. And the firm is a Microsoft Gold partner, and we do deliver a lot of different customized solutions to our clients. It includes infrastructure, data, and probably customized apps. I personally had about 5 years of experience in the Azure data world, and I started out working on a lot of Power BI customized projects for clients, and then I moved upstream to do like data warehousing, ETL, in tools like Synapse, Databricks, Azure Data Factory. And because it is a consulting firm, the clients are really coming from very different backgrounds. So I've had the chance to work for companies that are in manufacturing industry, education industry, retail, finance, all that kind. All right, so I am just gonna move on to the content part of this presentation. So there are three main components I want to talk about for our session. First is the basic components for Data Factory pipelines. I just want to do a brush up for everybody and kind of be able to tell the difference between a hard-coded pipeline and a parameterized pipeline. So that's what we're going to do first. Bear with me. It might be boring for you because you might already know how to do the hard-coded version of that. And then the second part of it is the parameters in the Data Factory pipeline. I'm going to give some examples and talk about how to do that. And I will do somewhat of a demo on how we do that on pipelines and how to pass in parameters on a simple copy activity. And last is the control system. We call it a control system at 3Cloud a lot. What it is, it's a SQL-based system where you can put all kinds of parameters in and help with orchestration in the pipelines. And then that's going to be a walkthrough. All right. So Azure Data Factory, I just want to give it a little bit of a brush up on what it is and what it really does from my perspective. So we do think or actually hear about big data on a daily basis. What it means is it really, it covers the relational databases, It also covers, all kinds of unstructured data. And the unstructured data in the raw form, it doesn't, they don't necessarily provide any value to the business. And what we need is to, bridge that piece from, raw data to a data warehouse, for example, to kind of bridge that transformation. Provide that service for the business to be able to grab some actionable items out of the data, right? So Azure Data Factory coming out in 2015 for the first version, and 2017 for the second version. It's a code-free, almost code-free ETL as a service tool, and helps with that piece of orchestration for you to do all kinds of a transformation and copy of your data from a source to a destination. So let's jump right in. We're going to talk about how to build a simple pipeline without any parameterization inside this pipeline thing. There are really only 6 steps that we need to concern ourselves with. Create a link service, a data set that on top of that link service, a pipeline on top of the data set, and of course activities inside the pipeline to kind of build that flow for the pipeline to know what it really needs to do. And then like any software development cycles you would be in, we want to test to make sure the pipeline is working. And then at the end of the day, set a trigger on top of it to operationalize the pipeline. And for example, you would set it as a schedule trigger, then it will just run every night, right? So at this time, my table is actually getting refreshed. All right, so this is what you would see when you click on plus sign and then create a new link service inside the managed pane in the workspace. There are a lot of different connectors readily available already. A lot of Amazon sources. There's a lot of different files or NoSQL sources you can connect to, and of course you can connect to a lot of the Azure SQL database or Azure sources, data lake, storage account, and all that. So for me, in my example, I'm going to be using a Azure SQL database as a source. And here we can see we need to just put in the name of the link service you want to name it as. And I do need to remind you that the name cannot be changed after you publish it, after you create it. So if this does not work for you, you'll need to create a new one and then create datasets on top of that again. All right, and then of course we need to specify what subscription we're trying to connect to, and then where the server resides in, right? What subscription it's actually at, and then the server name, database name, and then admin and password. And notice here everything's hard coded. It's with the normal white background here. All right, and then I would click on test connection, and if it succeeds, then I'll just click on create and done. Link service done. And then we'll move on to datasets. And once you decide to pick the dataset type, you'll see a very similar screen as link services. And again, I picked the Azure SQL database and as my dataset component. And here I just chose VentureWorks source DB, the link service I created just now. And here in the table, because datasets is going to ask you for granularity on tables. So the specific table I want to move, this is what I picked. And I do want to point out, because we're hard coding link services, datasets, and pipelines, the previous two steps I used to create the link service and dataset, we need to kind of repeat that for the destination database as well. So I'm not showing those specific screenshots, but just remember, we already created the link service for the destination as well, and the datasets for destination as well. But it's just a repetition of what we just did. All right, pipeline. As a matter of fact, for creating pipeline, it's just a simple click of button. Just say +, create a new pipeline, and you will have a new pipeline. But there's not going to be any activities in there, and that's the most important part for any pipelines inside Azure Data Factory. So let's talk about activities. In the activity here, I am just doing a very simple copy. As you can see, the screen looks like this. You're going to have a copy data activity showing up here, and you can rename it in the general tab saying, oh, I want to copy this table called address, because that's what we put in the data sets, right? So here we can configure the source, and we can configure the sink. For source, I was picking the AdventureWorks dataset, just like we created previously in the datasets. There's nothing much to it. We're just trying to grab a table. So in the use query part of this, you can see I'm not clicking on any query or store procedure. It's just a table. And everything else, I left it for now to default, but you could change some of these stuff as well. And of course, after we were done with the source, we will move on to sync. And again, remember, we have the destination data set up as well. So I could pick that. In the right behavior, it's an insert. And for a table option, I'm trying to do auto create table because I don't necessarily have this table readily set up or created inside my destination data set. And Azure Data Factory is actually intelligent enough to be able to kind of grab that schema from the source and just create the exact same thing on the fly inside your destination database. And here, just notice I have a pre-copy script, drop table if exists. Just typical thing to do if you are trying to run this pipeline multiple times, and you don't want necessarily have the data replicated into the table multiple times every time we run it. And also, it's just a good practice to kind of refresh that whole thing, right? Because if we drop it, then the destination table is going to, have everything that's coming from the source. Say if there's any schema change in the source, then if we drop it, then we can carry over the new columns as well. All All right, and basically this is done. I mean, once the activity is done inside the pipeline, I would almost consider it really done, but of course we want to test it. So here there's the debug button, and then there's the trigger button. And then I would normally just click on the debug button first to see if the activity actually like passes the test. But you could also just choose to publish this this pipeline and then trigger it with the trigger icon here. And inside it, there's going to be an option for adding a new trigger or just trigger it now. Those two options. And in my case, I would do a trigger now to kind of get that going. But of course, once those are all done, we want to set the trigger for it to make sure it's a part of your operations every night or every day in the morning, doesn't matter, or even like every 15 minutes, that's all doable. So in this demo trigger here, I always like to put a little bit of a description in there just to describe what we're trying to do with this this trigger. And then there's a start date it's going to ask you to fill in. And in my case, I just picked a random date to say, oh, so it should have started yesterday. And that's how Data Factory knows, okay, so today maybe I need to run it too. And in the time zone, for me, it's Chicago, so Central Time. But you could pick whatever. There's a long list of time zones available, and it's already adjusted for time savings. Sorry, a daylight saving time. So you don't have to necessarily change anything in wintertime for that either. And recurrence here is right now it's set to every day, run it at 9 a.m. And I want to call out the data type right now showing it's grayed out as a scheduled trigger. But when you actually create a trigger, it will ask you to pick the specific type of trigger as well. So there are actually 4 kinds of triggers available, I believe. So scheduled trigger is the normal one. It just runs on time. And then there's also like event trigger, which means you could probably say, okay, if the data factory is linked to a specific storage account, a data lake storage account, if there is a file getting dropped into that specific folder, it will trigger the specific workflow to kind of just start running. So different triggers, just whatever suits your need. And in this case, I have a scheduled trigger to run at 9 a.m. every day. All right, so I would consider us done with building a basic pipeline. This is good stuff. You're good to go in Data Factory. But then the question turns into, what if there are 1,000 objects to be moved? What if your manager tells you to move 1,000 objects to go from the same source into the same destination? What are you going to do? Are we really going to create 1,000 hard-coded pipelines? I mean, that's certainly doable. Just grab a drink and then sit there and really try to create all those data sets, all those link service. Well, link service you probably can get away with just 2 because it's the same source and the same destination. But with the data sets, you have to specifically tell the pipeline, oh, these are the source tables, these are destination tables, and then for the pipelines, the same thing, right? You have to point it to different data sets. So at the end of the day, you end up with 3,000 items to kind of maintain. And that's the problem we're going to be facing here if we choose to manually do that. It takes a long time, and then the maintenance in the future, that's also the part that's kind of scary to me, because if there's anything that got updated on the source or anything that we need to change in the destination, that we need to put some fixes into the pipeline, that means you will have 3,000 items to kind of fix instead of just having a simple thing that we could just go in and tweak and forget about it, right? Just fixed. So this is why it's so important for us to kind of talk about parameters that's readily available as a function inside Data Factory. So what it is parameters are just key value pairs that are defined in the pipeline. These values are provided to the pipelines at runtime when you click on that trigger, and it's going to prompt you to kind of put in some values for the pipeline to run. And it can be used in link services, it can be used in data sets, and it can be used in pipelines. Of course, there's also this thing called data flow inside Data Factory, but that's a little bit outside of what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm sure if we figure out how we can do that in the 3 other things, link service, data set, and the pipeline, you can figure it out in data flow in no time. And the actual workflow here for this parameter thing to work, right? A user or a trigger, it will input that value into the pipeline. And this pipeline is going to pass the value into activity. And activity, of course, is going to give it to the data set for it to know, okay, so this is a table I'm trying to use in the copy activity, right? And the link services underneath it, of course, it's going to need to use that as well. So data set is going to trickle it down to the link service. I do have a few examples here for that. So the three main kinds of parameters we have here: pipeline, dataset, link service, and really here all the parameters are just a placeholder. You can customize it to any name, and it will just work inside that specific artifact, I suppose. And I do want to call out there are also these things called system variables and exist in the pipeline a lot because it wants to tell you, okay, so this pipeline, when it ran, what is the run ID of it? And for example, the trigger name example here, it's going to tell you what triggered that actually triggered this pipeline. Sometimes it will say manual. That means an end user was testing it or just manually running it. So it will have a different name. But sometimes after you set up the trigger, in my previous case, it will just be called demo trigger, and that will be the value that's passed to you. And these are great things to have if you're trying to, set up a logging system. And the last thing I want to talk about here is the for each activity, and because it's almost like a for loop kind of thing, the sub parameters that are getting passed into this for each activity, they start with this item syntax. And if you see this, it doesn't mean it's different. I guess it's different level of a parameter. It just means it's inside a pipeline and inside a specific activity. All right. I know this is all very abstract, so just bear with me. I will talk about expressions and functions for a little bit as well, and then we will move into a demo, I guess, a walkthrough kind of thing for an example. So expressions and functions. Expressions is just a string that has probably functions in it and some kind of string value in there that you're trying to do a string manipulation kind of thing, or a date change, or some kind of math, right? And it just at runtime, the expression, I mean, the values passed into that expression, it will be transformed into a way and be replaced with that specific value inside the activity. And I do also have a few examples here. So the first one, if we look at this, it's literally a concat function, and we should all be familiar with it with some SQL background. So what this is doing is it's literally just writing up a select statement, a SQL query. So the example that I can put in here, it could be select last watermark, well, last modified date maybe, from saleslt.address order by last modified date time, and give it back to my descending order, in the descending order. And this is the select statement is going to pass into the activity. So the activity knows, oh, so now I probably need to run this on source system first, and then grab the result of that into the copy activity to actually do the copy. And the next one is a different example to kind of showcase that you can also use the output from a specific activity inside a pipeline and put it into the next activity. So in this case, this is the output of get max watermark from source activity. That's the activity's name. And we're trying to grab the watermark column of this. It could be multiple columns that's getting returned from this activity. And we're specifying, okay, so we're only trying to grab the watermark column from the results, and we only want the first row of that. So in this case, we will get the latest, the highest, I guess, the most recent watermark value from whatever table we're trying to run this at. All right. So now, as promised, we're going to talk about how to parameterize a pipeline. How do we actually put in these parameters? So again, the steps are exactly the same as creating, the steps involved are exactly the same as creating a hard-coded pipeline, but instead this time we're going to add parameters to it as well. So link services. I'd like to talk about the differences we're seeing here compared with the previous example. So remember last time we had to create two different link services for source and for destination because the granularity of the details, it's really asking for a database level detail, but because there are two different databases, so we had to create two different link service for it. But in this case, because we're trying to add this parameter here, if we can see here in the parameters section, I created this thing called a connection string. And then I was passing this connection string into the Azure Key Vault secret name here. I do want to explain what Azure Key Vault does first. So in case you're not familiar, it's just a service that's kind of masking a string value with a specific, I guess, name that you're giving to the secret. So for example, the connection string here I'm using is really a, how do I show you that actually? Let's see if I can. So I do have an example for that actually. What's actually specified in there is the server name, the database name, the username, the password, and a timeout value. And that will provide the data factory to enough detail for it to know, okay, so this is the place I need to connect to. And here, because I'm using the Key Vault secret, I'm passing this specific connection string in. This is basically done for the link service. It will just know how to, if you set up your link service as this for Azure SQL databases, and you have a connection string that's already saved in your Key Vault, then this is done. Just consider it done. I mean, every time we are going to test this link service, it will ask you for a connection string. And if you put in that name of your secret, it will know how to connect to it. And you will be able to see if that it connects successful or, failed to do that. So I would just move on to a data sets for now. And I promise I'll show you the connection string later. So once you create this data set called, for me, I called it Azure SQL Database Dataset. Once you create that with the Azure SQL Database source, what you're going to see is a page without these specific parameters. But what I want to call out is once you click on that link service, Azure SQL Database link service, telling dataset this is the link service I'm going to be using to connect to the tables, it will prompt you for the connection string value because that's the piece that's missing in link service, right? It's going to need to know that. And like we talked about, the dataset, the datasets need to be on a table granularity. So it's going to ask for specifics on what table you want to connect to, what table you want to grab. So in this case, because I want to parameterize everything, I don't want to hard code it on the dataset level. I chose to do an edit, and I just need to put in some kind of placeholder for it to know, okay, so the schema name and table name are going to be fed to me later. And to do that, we would go to this parameters side. And you can see here, I create the schema name, table name, and connection string as parameters to be passed into that connection tab here. All right, and I want to call out because of the fact that coincidentally the source and the destination are both Azure SQL databases. For me, I only need to create one data set instead of two different ones. So that would really minimize the number of link services and data sets that we have to maintain the pipelines, because the pipeline is going to be calling a generalized data set and generalized link service instead of hard-coded versions of those. All right, and a simple copy activity again here inside this pipeline. So again, we need to set up the source and the sink. And once we click on this data set that we just created, Azure SQL database data set, it's going to ask again the schema name, table name, and connection string, just like how the data set was asking for the link service connection string. All right, and I don't have any specific values to put into schema name or table name just yet, because again, I don't want to end up with 1,000 different pipelines, right? So what I would do is just to create the parameters for them. So again, you could click out of the activity. Usually when you click at the blank space, you will just be able to see these 4 different panes. And in the parameters pane, I put in the schema name and table name. And I also put in default value. This is just because I'm lazy. Every time if you do some triggering, these are the values that's just gonna get pulled up into the trigger instead of you having to input that string every time. And notice I didn't do the connection string because I mentioned connection strings are database specific, and for me, source and sink databases they are going to require 2 different connection string. And even if I create that parameter in the for connection string, it's not necessarily going to work for both source and sink. So here I just chose to hard code that piece, so we know this pipeline only works for the eventual works database that I'm trying to connect to, and also in the sink. Is the sink not showing up? In the sink, it's basically the same thing for that schema name and table name that I'm trying to put in there. I think something's out of order here, but let me go back to there a little bit later. But yeah, so this is what you're going to see. And in the sink, we're going to see the schema name, the table name, and then the connection string here. And just notice the pre-copy script here, that needs to be changed a tiny bit. And what it looks like is a drop table if exists, same syntax, but then here for the specific parameters, we are using a schema name, the table name again, but because these are 2 different parameters, and we're only using a dot to kind of separate them, just for the expression builder to know what these really are. The fact that they're 2 separate things, we just need to wrap it in the actual brackets to kind of wrap them, and for it to know these are two different values we're trying to use here, and it will know how to write up that drop table if it exists query. And once you're done with the activity, I would say we can move on to trigger again, right? Like in this case, I think I was just doing a test, and we could see that it said it passed with with these 2 values, because once you click on that trigger now, it's going to ask you for the parameters, because it still doesn't know what we're trying to run, right? The pipeline. So here it's a sales lt.product table that we're trying to bring over. So that's just what it is, and it will run with that, and we can see the input of this activity once it's done running. And here we can see in the pre-copy script it successfully replaced the schema name and the table name to sales LT and product. And if you go into the destination database, you will see that this table is already available there. All right, I believe this is really how we create some parameterized pipelines, and I would consider us really know how to do this now, at least in a simple copy activity, right? With very limited numbers of data sets and link services you have to create. So I do want to show you the connection string here, just to make sure that we're on the same page now. So really in here, there are just a few parameters that you need to pass into it for Data Factory to really know what it is. And in this case, my data source here is this is just the server name for where the database is at, and then initial catalog is the database name, eventual works. User ID and password, that's just something that you can make up or change at any moment for your database, and then come into the secret to kind of change that. And timeout is just a value that's just there. It doesn't really change how it connects to things. It's just like if it doesn't connect, then that's when it calls quit. And of course, for different sources, the connection string can be a little bit different. These are all information that's just available in the documentation website in Microsoft on Microsoft sites. If you want to head over there and find more examples, or you have a need to kind of create that connection string, then don't hesitate to do that. Okay, so now we know how to pass parameters into pipelines. The questions become, where do we even store those parameters? I know we could probably do a trigger on top of this. Say this time I did salesLT.product. I probably set a different trigger saying, okay, so this time I want to do salesLT.address, right? So that 2 triggers and set up at 2 different times, and they will just automatically run these 2 tables for us. Of course we can do that, but also the problem is we're going to end up with 1,000 triggers if there are 1,000 tables we need to move. Don't necessarily want to do that for the same reason, right? You don't want to have to scroll over all those things to figure out what needs to be changed when an update needs to be made. So not a great idea. That's why we're going to talk about control database. This is a solution that we really use quite often at 3Cloud for a lot of our client projects. And it really is a very simple idea of you're just storing a lot of parameters inside this system. And I do want to show you what's really involved for the simplest version of it. So really, it's 2 tables and 1 store procedure. And I usually personally use it. And I usually create an Azure SQL database for me to kind of create these tables and the store procedure. And we'll go from there usually. And let me show you what it's like for a connections table to be a connections table and what we need to store in the control table. So this is the connections table I have got for this example I was using here. Really, for the source system, I only have 1 SQL database, one Azure SQL database, AdventureWorks, and all of that detail was stored in here: server name, database name, username, password. But now to think about it, I probably didn't need to have these specific, breakouts of the detail of that connection string, because that connection string is going to connect me to this specific database already. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is this table, even though the idea of the connections table having to exist is there, we don't necessarily have to, create the table as is. There are a lot of things that we can do to kind of expand functionalities that your control system can work. And in the case of, say, the 1,000 tables we're trying to move, right? Really, the 1,000 of them are coming from 6 or 7 different source databases, and then you're trying to move them into 3 or 4 destination databases. What that means is potentially it's possible that I want to, change the name of some of these columns. Instead of calling it server name or like connection string, I might want to add 2 more or 3 more columns into it and say, okay, so I want to save it as sources services server name, and a destination server name, and source connection string and destination connection string. So that in the pipeline, you can also pass those values back. And instead of having to hard code anything inside of the pipeline, like I showed in the previous example, all of this is going to be automated at runtime. Okay, the point I'm trying to deliver here is make sure you should feel comfortable changing the structure of these tables. But the ultimate idea of a connections table is for where you're going to be storing all the information on a database level, right? Anything the link service, the dataset's going to ask for, it's right here. Sorry, the link service is asking for, not the datasets. The control table is actually more for the dataset table. Sorry, the datasets in the Azure Data Factory. I don't know why I kept doing that. All right, in the control table, like I said, it's all on object granularity because they feed into the datasets, right? So here we can see the self-LT, address, customer, customer address, product category. Those are just the names of these tables coming from the source system. There's nothing much to it. You just want to make sure that once these values gets passed into your pipeline, the data sets know these are the tables we're trying to grab. And in this example, I do have 2 different kinds of tables listed here, F for full load and I for incremental. The incremental example is a little bit too complicated for our purpose here in this session, so I'm going to skip those for now. But the solution I am going to show later does include some part of that. And I would like to say, like, if you're interested in how to make an incremental table work, meaning that this table is very large, you don't want to necessarily, move everything every time, drop the table in the destination database every time, and then spend 35, 40 minutes to kind of copy that activity. This is where you're going to want to look into. And this is just an example I'm putting here for you to have if you want to build it. So the last column here, include and load, this is just a flag to kind of tell the store procedure, okay, so some tables here, I want to move them, but some of these I don't want to include in the load anymore. For example, here, the customer address table, maybe I moved it the first time, but starting from the second time, I noticed that there are just a lot of columns that I don't need, or there's no column that I want to use that are coming from this table, right, in my report. So I want to drop it in my load every day, so that it saves me some money inside Azure Data Factory. Okay, so we went through the connection table and control table here. I do want to just go into demo mode and do a walkthrough of the pipelines that I've got created inside the Data Factory as an example here. All right, I'm gonna get out of presentation mode and go into my Data Factory and of course the database here. Can everybody see clearly what's shown on both sides, or do I need to like zoom in somewhere?
You can see it, but like if you go into Object Explorer at all, if you can zoom in, like if you're highlighting something there, and the same a little bit on the portal, the results set and the query is a pretty good size.
Okay, got it. Okay, I will specify what's in here now. I don't think I can zoom in on the Object Explorer side of things. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. You don't have Zoom It installed?
No, I don't actually for this time.
No worries. I'll send you a link for that.
I will do that next time for sure.
Okay.
All right. So.
However, if I may just interrupt also for 1 second, attendees, you can use control and mouse wheel, so the attendees can actually zoom in on what you're doing if it's too small for anybody. Sorry.
No, you're good. Thank you. Thank you for all of that. That really helps me actually. So in the Data Factory side of things, if we look at the pipelines here, I actually have quite a few different pipelines built here. So we can see we went from the simple copy pipeline with all of the hard-coded values specified in here to the parameterized version of this with the schema name, table name, and all that stuff passed in as an example, to a full load example that we're going to be walking through in this session, and also a more complicated version of including full table copies and incremental table copies inside this example. But again, I just want to talk about how to parameterize inside a full load for now, because that, first of all, we probably don't have enough time to go through the incremental stuff. Second of all, it is a little bit more complicated than not. So if anybody's interested in this, definitely just reach out, and I'd be happy to, email you the solution here, and you can just go have fun with it yourself. Right, like I said, the solution I want to walk through here is really the parameterized full load pipeline here, and I just want to go through what's involved inside this pipeline first. So it consists of, right now you can see it's 2 activities, but then there are really 3 activities involved in this part of the pipeline, because for each there's a copy activity in here. So let's start with the lookup activity. First of all, I just changed the name of it to get full tables and set the timeout to be 30 minutes because I don't think it should pass that 30-minute time for the lookup to work. And what this lookup does is it connects to the control database. And then it will try to run this store procedure called get table from control. And let me show you this inside the control database. Get tables from control. This store procedure is going to ask for a connections name and a is.load flag. And based on this connection name, it's going to try to figure out what the connection ID is. And this store procedure, really what it's doing is it's using that connection ID to do a filter on what table are really stored in the control table that are coming from connection ID 1. And also they are set to be included in load and has a incremental type of full load, right? Because we're trying to do a full load here. And as we can see, the parameters I'm trying to pass into the store procedure here is .load flag was automatically set to 0. It's hard coded to 0 because I know these two activities are only going to load full tables for me. And here for the connection name, I did parameterize it. Just in case, say, like in the future, you're adding a bunch of different connections into your connection table. You could just say, in my case, it's only going to AdventureWorks every time, but say you have a Salesforce source, right? Then you can pass in Salesforce and then it will know, okay, so this time I'm not running for AdventureWorks and I'm only doing that for Salesforce. So that's the flexibility here. That's why we want to parameterize things. All right, so the store procedure, it returns literally everything that you have stored for the specific table inside connections table and the control table. So all of your table ID, your schema name, your table name, your increment type, and all that stuff, they're all going to, connection string, most importantly, they're all going to be passed back into this for each activity later once the lookup activity finishes running. And let's see what for each activity needs to move on. In the settings here in items, we can see right now I picked the array of row data, get full table value array. And this is an activity output that's coming from the get full tables activity. The reason I didn't use, for example, this is because I want to make sure that I have literally every row of the output coming to my next coming into my for each loop. If I do the array here, then it will know it's all the value that's coming from the store procedure, meaning all of these details store schema name, table name, and all that stuff, instead of maybe the count or like just a JSON paragraph, I guess, passed out from the activity. And for each activity is going to take the items coming from this expression and use that, pass all of those values into the loop to kind of do this activity that's inside it, that's nested inside. So it will know, for example, in my case, I had, let's see if this is the control table. Yeah, so in my case, I had quite a few tables here listed as full loads. It will just know there should be like, 7 of these tables, but of course this one is 0, so it's not going to count. And there should be six tables that we're trying to kind of grab and put into this copy activity. Make sure all these 6 tables are getting the copy activity done. All right, and then let's see in the source and sink. This is quite similar to what we did previously in the simple parameterized copy example. But instead of doing the parameters inside pipeline, we are doing this inside a for each activity. So everything previously we were calling as pipeline.schema name or something like that, all of these are changed to item.schema name now. And really, you can just do this by clicking on the for each iterator, and it's just going to tell you this is item something is what is the syntax you're looking for. And because I know the name is going to be schema name, that's going to be passed by from from the store procedure, I will just put this in, and then that's basically what we need for this parameter to work. And again, it's just a table, nothing specific there. But also just to, I guess, give you an idea, if you really want to, you can also do a query in here. But you could just, if you want to do some kind of transformation on your source data before you start copy it, you could pass in a query to kind of do a concat or something, so that the copy data activity is going to do that before it starts the copy. And then in the sync, same idea. It's item dot schema name, item dot table name. But then again, like I didn't store the connection string for my destination database inside my connection table. That's why I had to hard code this piece. But again, if you added the destination information, the destination connection string in here, and have it stored in your key vault, then this piece can be parameterized as well. Again, we're trying to do an auto create on table. So for full load, we're just dropping everything as we go. And again, there's nothing specifically different to the parameters inside this box. It's just item.schema name instead of pipeline.schema name, pipeline.table name here. And I do believe I ran this pipeline yesterday at some point. Let's see if I can still see that pipeline and kind of walk that through as well. So here we can see that we have the get tables activity as we expected. And let's take a look at the input. So for this activity here, we have the parameter set to AdventureWorks and 0. Actually, you know what? Let me just try to run that just to show you what it looks like inside the trigger as well. So if I do trigger now, the pane's going to come out. And because I set the parameter for connection name inside here already as the default value AdventureWorks, that's why when I do the trigger, it's going to just populate AdventureWorks for me. And if I click on OK, this just means this pipeline is set to run now. And you can see all these prompts saying, okay, it just started running, right? So let's just let it run. But I would also like to just kind of go into that example again to walk through the pieces involved. And we can go back to that running pipeline to see how it finished. It should do the exact same thing. So again, we passed in the connections name as AdventureWorks. And its delta load flag was hard-coded to 0, if you can recall, inside the pipeline, because we only want to run full load tables. What we got is the output from this specific activity. It tells you the count of the items involved, and also the actual values of these tables, what they're called, what their watermarks are, what their increment type is, right? And what the connection string is that we need to use inside this pipeline. And as you can see, 6 items, and we should be able to see 6 chunks of these JSON. But yeah, indeed, we had 6 different items passed over from getFull tables. And this is going to get passed into the for each activity. And if we confirm here, we will see item count 6. And it doesn't necessarily repeat what's coming out of the output because you can find it here. In the output, there's nothing there. It just says, okay, I went into the loop and started to do the copy activity here. And if we count, there are 6 different copy activities. And if we click on each one of these inputs, we would see, if we look at the pre-copy script, that's where you can tell, okay, what table this specific activity is doing. And of course, the output of it is how much data was written to, specific table, specific location, rows read, and all that kind of good stuff. Again, great for creating a logging system with easier troubleshooting from my perspective when you store it in a relational database. And of course, there's this binocular looking icon, and this is where you can actually see a nice GUI telling you when this table started copying, what was what was the time it spent in the queue to kind of do that, and how much time did the pre-copy script take to kind of run, how much it really took it for it to copy all the data over. Okay, I believe this is it, and we did get a prompt earlier saying that the pipeline we ran previously successfully finished. So we can also go over there to kind of take a look at that. Refresh this. You will see there's the run start, run and the duration of when it triggered. Right? So exact same stuff, but what it means is we just refresh the table one more time, and in the destination database we should be able to see, like, all of those tables we're expecting. So for example, let's see, I know it's a little bit harder for you to see that, so if you want to zoom into it, you should be able to see all of these tables that start with sales LT in the destination database. And if we go back to the control table and kind of go through that to make sure that we're only copying the tables we want, this is the time. So we have the address table. If I click open that and do a select, I will be able to see 450 rows, just like my VentureWorks source, I believe, hopefully. Let's take a look. Yeah, 450. So at least for address table, that's the correct count, right? Like, we can confirm this table is probably more likely going to be, correctly copied over. And customer table, we have it here, and we have product category that got passed in here. We have the product table here, product model, product description, and what we're missing is the customer address table because we set it to be 0. So we are not supposed to copy it over in the first place. All right, this is basically it. I would like to say, one more thing, I guess. I would like to open the session up for you to ask questions. One more thing I want to talk about. So I know the solution here, the control system, it's really built for the purpose of storing parameters, right? Specifically for the connections and for the tables. People, you might be thinking, why can't we just store it in a flat file, for example, a JSON file, and have it stored in a data lake location and have Data Factory read it when we want to run all of this stuff? To be honest with you, I have seen that done before at one of the clients. And honestly, I didn't like it because I'm more in the relational mindset that I want my query to run a specific way, and I know the query is reliable. Every time I run, it should give me the right results. I don't want to go into that JSON file and try to search for, okay, so did I actually run this table or not this time? In the relational database, it's easier for you to just filter it and say where include and load is 1, right? You can see everything. For me, it's just an ease of mind. And I think it's best practice to do it this way, even though you have to put a little bit of time in there to kind of get it going. So that I would call this a wrap up for my side of things on the demo. I would love to go into a question time on this and see what you all think of this solution.
So folks, you can put questions in the chat, or if you want to come off mic to ask questions also, or you could raise hands and I can call on people. We're flexible here, whatever works.
Appreciate
a way to
flexibility.
see the parameters that you passed into a job?
The parameters I got passed into a job? Do you specifically mean like in a...
So like from the monitoring or...
Yeah, okay, sure. So parameterized full load, this is the one we just ran, right? So in the first activity here, get full tables in the input. You can also enlarge that. We can see the, so the source here is the get tables from control store procedure, and it's going to ask for the connection name and it's down to load table. And the connection, the connection name is the only parameter that's really, I guess, set in this pipeline to run, to gather the information at runtime. And then here it's adventure works. That's the value I passed into it. And its delta load, it was just hard coded to 0 to run every time. So this is the parameter, if that makes sense. Or are you asking about the parameter inside the pipeline to see as well? So
Where would you see the pipeline parameters?
yes. So for the pipeline parameter here, we can see. So in the settings on the specific activity, if you scroll down in the settings pane, you will see that these parameters, you can do it in
But for the run, like in the monitoring, right? Isn't there a way from like the monitor?
Yes, actually, you're right. So here,
Right.
we
That's what I was thinking of.
We will be able to see. Yeah, you're right. So the parameters on this side. So this is the specific one that we passed in. So you don't. Like Leslie said here, we don't have to go into the pipeline itself to kind of grab that information. Just in the monitor pane itself, you'd be able to see what's passed in every time. All right. Anything else? If not, I do like to, I guess, do a very quick showing of what this solution is. So a sneak peek of it. So for incremental tables right here, we're just trying to kind of get the settings to run is delta load as 1. And then in the for each, we're trying to do a little bit more complicated things for the watermarks. And that just means the table, you are only copying the specific time period record into our destination database. And I just want to say, if you are actually interested in the solution, I would be happy to email it to you. And for incrementals, there are a little bit more activities involved to make it happen. Just want to call that out. Is the framework available on GitHub? Right now, it's not, but that's a great call. I should reach back out into 3Cloud as a whole company, and we should actually start to do this, put it into a pool or something. All right.
Okay. Well done. I don't
Thank you,
understand
thank you.
anything about an Azure Data Factory, but like I was able to follow along somewhat for me. So
Good stuff. Yeah, so thank you everybody for being here today, and I certainly want to also thank New Star Data to kind of host this event and give me the chance to kind of walk this through and figure out if next time I need to do this, what I need to adjust. So certainly I appreciate the chance, and I enjoyed the time doing this demo. So